Scientists prove that the living beings get better and better forms through evolution, not worse forms. So too the spiritualists prove that the evolution of consciousness is making man better and better. Though the surface mind is worse again and again, the progress of the consciousness towards the soul is always there, and it catches hold of the personality after some time. After some rebirth, the human birth will be possessed by the process of the positive change of nature, and someday he begins to retrace his own path, and the mind and the senses begin to follow the soul. Until then, nature gives us birth and death, because it has to create new opportunities for us again and again when we fail. And then, when once we get at the soul consciousness, the force of habit begins to help the other way. Here also Patanjali gives us a good example. We have the five senses and the objects of senses, and the mind that receives the impressions of the objects of the senses. But we are there at the center, and we are not affected by any one of these things. The mind and the senses put together, they form the negative I am, that is the lower personality, what we can call the lower human being. Whereas the higher human being in you, who is called the Lord, is there as yourself within. And this whole thing, negative I am, is one principle that is living in you. The positive I am is the other thing that is in you. And generally, habits belong to the negative I am. You should make a habit to make an approach to the positive I am. When you make such a progress with the help of something which attracts you, like good music or painting or poetry, or the company of a person, whatever begins to help you, you take advantage of it. Sometimes it may be a good book also. And then repeat, begin to practice what is given to you. You will have the fulcrum principle in you, and as long as you are existing in the negative I am, you are like a person walking against the fulcrum and the balance. Every step you take will be burdensome. You have to walk against gravity, because your habits make you gravitate again to themselves. Once again, you are trying to come out of your habit. Once again, you are slipping back. But when you reach this point, you are safe. And when you cross that point, the balance swings in the opposite direction, and the force of your habit helps you to take your progress in the required direction. The same force of habit was against you previously, but here the force of habit is for you, it is favorable. The same thing helps you after certain stage. Your incidents of your daily life will help you to reach your soul consciousness. When once you begin to repeat some good thing daily, if you begin to repeat the right yoga practice, instead of trying to understand what yoga is, it is quite useless to try to understand what yoga is. Even though you study the yogic literature of the whole world for 50 years and try to compare the books of one author with the other, you will be no better than a great scholar of yogic literature. You will know everything only to die with all the details. In such a stage, the scriptures compare the scholar to a donkey that is carrying bags of sugar. That is, the donkey knows only the weight and not the sweetness. So, a great scholar of yogic literature who begins to study all books on yoga in the world tries to compare the values of 2 authors and 3 authors. He lives like a donkey carrying bags of sugar, and he dies with them. So, Patanjali advises us not to try to understand what yoga is. Begin to practice what is given as instruct. That's why in the first aphorism, he warns us that it is only an instruction and not a philosophy. Suppose when I am hungry, you serve me food and ask me to eat. If I ask you, what happens when I eat? And if I decide that I should not eat until I understand what happens after eating, The result is inevitable death. The same is the fate with the fellow who tries to understand what yoga is. Yoga is not a philosophy. It is not discourse. It is a course to practice. There is much to practice and very little to understand in it. So, when you begin to practice daily and make a systematic repetition, you will progress in such a way that after a certain time, your daily incidents and the presence of your friends and relatives and family members and your attitude towards them is the only thing that helps you to progress. That's why a yoga is expected to be an inevitable householder after a certain time.